Welcome back to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. My name is Conrad Weaver. I'm your host, and I want to thank you for tuning in to another important conversation for first responders. My guest today is Liz Bartholomew. Her husband, Joe, a retired firefighter, barely survived a devastating fire. But what followed was in so many ways even more damaging. In this raw and honest conversation, Liz walks us through the trauma, the betrayal, the hurt, and ultimately the healing journey that led them to create Responders Retreat, a sanctuary for first responders in crisis. And you'll learn more about that in the show. This episode isn't just about pain, it's about purpose. It's about what happens when someone chooses to rise from the ashes to lift others up. So stick with us to the end. You'll not only hear a story that might mirror your own in some way, but you'll also discover that healing is possible. Connection matters, and sometimes the healing comes when you help others. So let's jump right into my conversation with Liz Bartholomew. Well, Liz, welcome to the First Responder Wellness Podcast. I'm so glad we can have you on the program today.
I'm so glad you asked me. This is such a nice venue for people to share their stories and the need for people to understand first responders and the wellness they need to be, help take care of them.
Yeah, it was great to meet you now, I guess a couple months ago up in Wisconsin at an event. And I heard a little bit of your story. I was like, we need to talk about this and talk about what you're doing. So you host a first responder retreat up in Three Lakes, Wisconsin. What inspired you to start this effort of bringing first responders together for a retreat?
Well, I've the last 20 years, my husband has had PTSD from a response call on a fire department. And when he got it and I saw how he was treated and I started talking to other people, one of the things I realized is that people aren't always willing to share the information for fear of losing their jobs and such. But the other thing is they don't want to, they're not ready for treatment. Mm-hmm. And so when we moved up to Wisconsin, after he went out on a duty disability, I saw a whole different level of healing in him. Just sitting out in nature and enjoying what was around him and stuff. And it seemed like he could be more relaxed and calm. And I thought, why can't we offer this to other people? If they're not ready for counseling, at least let's give them a place to open a conversation with other people like them, where they won't feel judged and where they won't feel judged and ostracized.
Yeah, stigmatized.
Sure. And so this was an initial thought. And initially I was thinking firemen. Then I was thinking firemen and police. And then it just hit me, from dispatch all the way to the ER nurses, those people all respond on the same calls, on the same levels. They're dealing with the same parts of it, but handling it at different times in different manners. So I decided that it would be for anybody in the country, from dispatch all the way to the ER nurses, to come and have some time with us, get some information. Let's have some conversations, but let's have recreation to give them time to process and to enjoy and to just be out there and have the mindfulness and feel like they can go back and they were able to take a breath and say, oh, it's okay. We can go from here.
So I want to get more into that, but first I want to kind of talk about your husband. And he was a longtime firefighter. And so tell us a little bit about his story and about what led him to this critical incident that he was involved in.
So my husband's name is Joe, and he had been a paid-on-call firefighter for 9 years. And then he got hired in Aurora full-time, and he was there for 23 years. So anyway, he when he was on there, he had a fire in the fall of 2004. And it was a house fire, an older house, and they had been trying to get into where the fire was. He was a lieutenant. He had 2 guys with him, and they were tasked with going to the basement. They went down there, they found the fire, and they were calling for more assistance in the basement, and they weren't getting a response on the radio. So their bells were starting to sound on their air packs, and he said, let's go up, we'll get fresh air packs, we'll get another team to come down and help us with this, and we'll come right back down. And the other two guys went up in front of him and didn't realize that something had fallen on him. He called on the radio several times, emergency man down, and there wasn't a response. The guys on the outside fire stations could hear him calling for help, and they were talking to the dispatchers and saying, hey, he's calling for help, and there's nobody answering the radio. Well, the two guys that went out with him realized that he wasn't there, and they had already disbanded the RIT team, the Rapid Intervention Team, to go that was supposed to be there. And so some guys went in and kind of freelanced, found him downstairs underneath some stuff that had fallen on him. I believe it was ceiling, part of the ceiling and stuff, and took him up the stairs and outside. He said at one point the mask had stuck to his face. And when the police helped get him from the porch to the ambulance, when he got in the ambulance, he said he looked at the two guys and he said, am I alive? Am I dreaming? Am I alive? And they hugged him and said, it's okay. You are alive. You're going to be fine. Went to the hospital, and he called me and said, can you come pick me up from the hospital? We had a fire, and I'll be going home instead of back to the station. And I said, okay. So I went, and when I went in, he was being taken away to be checked for smoke inhalation. The two policemen that were in the same cubicle as him, after he went down the hall, they said, boy, I could never do his job. And I was kind of surprised because Aurora has, it's about 180, 200,000 people. There was gangs there. The police were on the streets with that. And I thought, you're out on the streets with people with guns and stuff, And it kind of surprised me. And the nurses were working on their hands. They had second-degree burns on their hands from helping him with grabbing his coat and getting him to the ambulance. His coat was that hot.
Wow.
So we went home, and he didn't say anything about the fire, and about a year later, we were in a car wash, and all of a sudden, his arms went straight out when the soap hit the windows. And I said, hey, what's up? And he said, it's that call. And I said, what call, And then that's only then did he start to tell me about the call.
So he never talked about it at all with you?
At all.
Wow.
So then, so this was about a year later. So I said, maybe you should go see the EAP counselor. They're lucky where they are that they had one. And he went in and saw them, and they said, you have a severe case of PTSD. Let's find you a counselor that's willing, that knows some stuff to work with you there. Well, then I started looking up PTSD and also talked to the counselor a little bit with him. And then things from that past year had made sense to me. He was kind of moody. He'd get angry real quick. He was disassociating from us. He would take his plate of food and go eat in front of the TV downstairs or down the hall. The person that was more fun to be with and could joke and stuff, that side of him seemed gone. And I didn't know if it was his age or anything. I couldn't put it with anything until he got diagnosed with PTSD. And I went and started researching the signs and symptoms. And I just went down the list and I went, check, yep, on all these things that fit into there. So when he had gone back to the fire department the next day after that fire, they always have their incident debriefing. And so when he went in, usually there's a neutral chief in there to do the debriefing, to let them talk and have to say what they need to say also. And nobody was available, so the same chief came in, and he said, hey, sorry about yesterday. He says, my radio was to the wrong frequency. And then after that, Joe said, so when were you going to come get me? And he said, we weren't. We had written you off.
Wow. What?
And this is all stuff that I didn't find out for about a year. And it's probably good. It's probably good, because in the heat of the moment, I might have been walking downtown. Then when he went in and told them he had PTSD, that he'd been diagnosed with it, they told him, they sent someone to tell him that he had 6 months to get over it. He could retire or be fired. Well, Joe was, I guess what I would call a go-getter fireman. He was on he did arson and investigation. He was on the scuba team. He was very good, and that became his path to go down as far as hazardous material and terrorism response. And he had all this training and stuff behind him. He was a lieutenant at the time. He was number 1 on the captain's list. And they were going to just throw this guy away. Mm. And of course, that just kind of broke him. Yeah. And so I was trying to figure out what I could do. I got to a point where I realized I couldn't help him. He has to work with the counselor. I can be supportive of him, but I can't fix him. So he started going to the counselor. Somebody had handed us a card for a lawyer. And they said, oh, you're going to need this. And we go, no, he didn't have the radio with the right frequency. We can't imagine that we would need this. So sure enough, he got a letter that said they were going to fire him. We had to call an attorney who's very good at this. And he said, no, he said, in the state of Illinois, they can't fire you. It's a workman's comp issue. So then he was put on light duty. And we're there for the first so many days, you're 8 hours a day in the central station. And so he was doing that. Well, when somebody can't fire you, they're going to treat you as bad as they can to get you to quit.
To get you to leave, yeah.
Exactly. So he was going through all kinds of unbearable things. He was being mocked and ridiculed, and he was being made to do things that other guys that were on light duty didn't have to do. He felt separated from the guys, that he had worked with all this time. The lawyer said, just hang in there. Just hang in there. You'll get your checks every week like you normally do. Keep going to counseling. Keep going to, when you go to the counseling and those checks, sometimes the workman's comp person comes in and asks a question, and keep having conversations with them. We'll work through this. And that process for us took 5 years.
Wow.
And after...
so he was on light duty for all those 5 years?
Yes. So, but there was people and administrative staff in the department that took the time to try and understand PTSD and what he was going through. And they were supportive of him, but not at the very top. And it got to be where in the chief's meeting, there was stuff, he was being made fun of. And so one of the chiefs stood up and said, what the heck are you guys doing? This guy was doing his job. He was in a fire. Somebody in our ranks did not have their radio to the right frequency. He comes out, he has PTSD, and you're going to treat him this way and throw him under the bus?
Hey, over the years, I've struggled with maintaining a consistent workout. And then going into the gym, sometimes I wasn't really sure what I should be doing to achieve the goals that I want. And then I discovered Train Well. Train Well is a program that actually works to keep me on track to achieve the goals I have. So for the past few weeks, I've been using Train Well, which paired me with an actual trainer. After I signed up, I had a Zoom call with my personal trainer who set up a program that I now use every day. It was easy to sign up, and I love that my workouts are now specifically made for me. So if you have some of the same issues with being consistent and knowing what to do, Train Well may have a solution for you. You can take the quiz that pairs you with your perfect trainer, and you can get 14 days of free training at go.trainwell.net go.trainwell.net/first responder wellness. That's go.trainwell.net/first responder wellness. I've put a link in the show notes below so you can just click on it and go right there and sign up. And you can learn how you can train well. See what I did there? Go check it out.
It got to be contentious a couple times in those chief meetings. So that particular chief that had spoke up for him came to him and said, Joe, you're on my shift. After this many days on light duty downtown, you can come and go back on the rotating shift duty. You just can't go into fires. So he went on with this guy. That guy kind of took him under his wing, and he gave him a feeling of value. He had him be a scribe. He talked to him about things. He asked him questions and such, and that helped out a great deal. One of the things with when you're in the fire department and stuff, if someone says something about you, it always comes back to you. Mm. And there was people that were trying to help him and be on his side and said, Joe, I was at this station today and they were saying this thing about you. And, some of it is he's too old to be a fireman anymore. He needs to grow a pair. Maybe he's just weak and old and things like this. But every time that came back to him, it came back to him and it came back to his wife and family. Sure. So every bit of this went through us. So I was really terribly disappointed in the response from the administration to something that happened to a person. He didn't ask for it. Mm-hmm. He couldn't control it. It's just our brain's response to a traumatic event or a series of events. Mm-hmm. And you have to have time to work through that. And the fact that this is a known thing that's happened to veterans for years, mm-hmm. and there still wasn't understanding and there wasn't sympathy and compassion and empathy, in this situation, that just angered me. Mm-hmm. And so for those 5 years, he went through the court system and dealing with what he had to. He got a second letter later on that said they were going to fire him again. And the attorney went once again to court and said, you can't fire him, In the end of those 5 years, we had to go and apply for a duty disability pension. To get that, then the city attorney sent him to, because the doctors that we had, the psychiatrists, the psychologists and stuff that had seen him, were, probably in their mind going to be on our side. So they sent him downtown to Chicago, to some people. One of the psychiatrists said, oh, there's nothing wrong. He's just claustrophobic now. Just give him some medicine. He'll be fine. And somebody else said something similar, just that wasn't happening. But when we got to the duty disability hearing, those things were kind of X'd out as, no, we have all these other studies and reports about what happened to him. And so this needs to be taken care of. And so he did get his duty disability. That was a really hard meeting for him, mm-hmm. because even when he went back to the station, after he could talk about the call and what happened and the guys that were being supportive, every time he got to the point where he said, something had fallen on me, I was calling for help and nobody was answering. And he said, at that point, I said, God, if I'm not going to make it out of here, please take care of my wife and kids. Hmm. And he said, every time he got to that point, he started crying. He broke down, and it was hard to get past that. And so that happened again at his meeting. And but he did get that, and we stayed local to there for a couple years, sold our house, and came up to Wisconsin. I will say, during that time, his wife was so angry. I was lucky that my kids weren't small. My daughters were both in college. And so as angry as they could be about the situation, they could have an understanding. Mm-hmm. And for me, every time I went by the fire department, I gave a certain wave that didn't have all my fingers, and I was so angry and somebody was in the store with me, and it was the wife of one of the chiefs. And she just, like, I had talked to her at other events and stuff like this, and she like turned and walked away from me, like she didn't know me and such. Watching the hurt in him, and him losing his sense of value and feel so degraded and such, just broke my heart, and it didn't matter what I said to him about how much value he had and how much he had done for the department and such. It didn't seem to help at the time. So I had to work through things myself.
It's crazy. If he would have, perished in that fire, he'd have been lauded as a hero, probably gotten a promotion, posthumous,
Yes.
and all that. But he survived.
Yes.
He that's more than, what you could do if you just die. I mean, he
Correct.
survived and thrived and lived to tell about it. How is he not a hero then?
Correct. And that's what I had told after he got diagnosed with that. I went around and I found a few local fire departments, and I went to talk to them. And I said, can I come up and talk to your guys one time? And so they included me in there, and I said the story. And I said, I want you to be okay. I said, I want every single one of you to be okay. And I want you to know, if this were to happen to you, you did nothing wrong. It's an injury or an illness. And I said, when this happened to Joe, if he would have died, he would have had the big firefighter's funeral and all the the fire trucks and stuff coming down the street and stuff like this. But he didn't. So let's throw him under the bus, make fun of him, kick him while he's down, because that's the way we should, as grown-ups, that's the way we should handle life, And so yeah, that was very kind of heartbreaking and stuff. And he was number one on the captain's list. I told you that. Well, during the time that he was on light duty, his name came up for captain, and they said, well, we're not, the city said they weren't going to promote him. He went to his union, and they said, well, not we as a union, I have no intention of getting someone promoted when they probably won't come back to work. So, I mean, there was that timing in there that could have happened, and that was heartbreaking for him too. And about a year later, one of the guys that pulled him out, God bless him, he had passed away from cancer, and he was on his deathbed at home. They went to his house. Somebody helped hold his hand up so he could take the oath, so they could promote him before he died.
Wow.
And I don't blame them. I mean, that's a lovely thing to try and do for somebody, but it's just like picking and choosing who you're going to help out, And my thing from the very beginning was, I don't know why it's so hard to see somebody that's down in any circumstance and not want to put your hand out and help them up and say, I see you're struggling today. What can I do to help? How can I make this better? And so that's when I started going around to these other fire stations and talking to these guys, telling them what happened, telling them to make sure you get help. See if you can see a counselor. And if you can't see a counselor, find somebody to talk to. And some of the guys at every single one of those things that I went to talk to, there was about 4, I think, came up to me afterwards and said, I've had that call, or I've been there. And I said, oh, did you get counseling? Are you kidding? Did you see what happened to your husband? I have no intention of going through that. I have no intention of letting anybody at my station know that those thoughts are in my mind. And so that really bothered me.
Like you mentioned earlier on that, moving up to Wisconsin was actually kind of therapy for your husband. So what is it about getting into the wilderness or getting into nature that helps people to deal with these things?
Well, there are many studies out there on the therapeutic effects of being out in nature, being out where you can enjoy what is around you, taking in, being in the moment. So for my husband, we were fortunate enough to be able to get a house on a lake, and so he would sit on the deck and he would watch the movement of the water and the sun shining on the tops, and when it's kind of stormy out, the white caps on the lake and the animals that are up here and the birds that come through, which kind of inspired him to start taking pictures. We've had deer come across our yard and a bear on our deck, raccoons and stuff. And yeah, sometimes you can see that in other settings, but on more of a regular basis, foxes, going down the street. And he was just amazed, and it just calmed him to just see these things going on around him. We have found that some of the responders that have come enjoyed just getting on one of those stand-up boards and just slowly paddling along the shoreline and just kind of looking around. And I think it just calms your soul from the inside out.
How has it been for you, to having dealt with all this tragedy and this, frustration and the lack of support and, processing all of that? How has moving to a place like that been for you? And then doing something like this retreat and kind of making that happen and helping others, how has that been therapy for you?
So, like I said, I was angry at the beginning, that just at the fact that people can treat each other that way, and so I've been told that I probably have vicarious PTSD, listening to his story and over, and I've gone to where I can try and understand a lot better what's going on with him. But as a lot of people know, with PTSD, it just doesn't, you don't go to the doctor for so long and it goes away. They have moments, they have triggers, they have flare-ups, and we had a kind of a funny story. I was telling him something that I wanted him to do, just basic husband-wife stuff. And he said, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I said, "Because you have hearing aids and you can't hear me." So, but his mind went to that I was yelling at him, and I was yelling at him because he couldn't hear me. So we deal with that, kind of on a regular basis on what he's going through. Sometimes he just needs to go. He'll go down and sit at the dock and cast and think about stuff. And for me personally, my world was filled with things I was doing. And I guess I would have to say I was probably meant to walk down this path and be a caretaker, because I was there to help take care of my aunt, my grandma across the street, my parents, Joe. And then when this thing came into play for Responders Retreat, it seems like I still want to take care of the people that need help. So it's been frustrating at times, but it's also been very rewarding.
Well, it's amazing what you are doing and coming out of that situation that you and your husband were in, that he was in, and now you're reaching out to help others. It's honorable, and I think kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you so much.
Helping others. So, what would you say if you had a chance to sit down with those leaders back then? What would you say to them now?
I would say, when I coached, I always told my kids, when you go out in life, treat people like you would want your grandmother treated, and you'll be good. You'll be okay. And I don't understand. I would say to them that I didn't understand why they felt the need to belittle somebody and make them feel small and unvalued. Is that something that makes you feel like you're powerful? Is it something that you just think is funny? And the fact that you don't understand that what happens to this person and how you as an administrative person react not only affects him, it trickles down to the family. Mm. And so every time you think you're being funny or you think this is okay to do, when you're kicking him when he's down, you're kicking me when I'm down. When he's down, you're kicking my kids when they're down. And if this happened to you, I hope it never does. I hope this never happens to you or your children. But if it did, how would you want to be treated? That would, it seems simple to me, but I guess it's more complex. And it can't be about the budget. This is somebody's life. People that don't make it through this commit suicide. And it's so sad that in some cases, I would have to say, if people had reached out and helped them, maybe they'd still be here, if you didn't make them feel that way.
Mm-hmm. So when is your next retreat, and is it open to anyone that's a first responder?
Our next retreat is September 22nd through 26th. It is open to anybody, any dispatcher, law enforcement, firefighter, EMS, emergency room nurse. We've had some corrections officers that said, am I included in that bunch? Yeah. We consider you to be officers, and there's no cost. They just have to go to our website, and there's a button to click on there for an application, which just gives us basic information. The retreat, they come in on Monday afternoon, and they leave Friday after lunch. And some of the rooms are the cabins. The cabins, usually we have the people that are struggling with the PTSD symptoms, because part of being down by the water and the campfire and stuff is part of healing for them. There's also some that are coming in on with the Operation Grace, which is the police information, which it gives them police training hours. Mm-hmm. So there are some dorms there, and we've had really good reviews on the food. There's a dining hall that we go to, and that's the date. But it's anybody can come, and there's no cost to them this year.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing that. Thank you for helping to take care of those who serve our communities and to make a difference. And thank you for taking care of you. And
I'm trying.
Yeah. I know that can be a challenge, right?
Yeah, I know there are days.
Yeah, sure. But thank you for being on the program and for sharing your story and your husband's story. And I hope that you guys are thriving and doing well as well.
Yes.
And just to clarify, just because you come fishing doesn't mean you're going to go home with a walleye, right?
Exactly. They say it's all about the atmosphere. Yeah. I have a sign on my husband's workshop door that says "Gone to drown worms."
Well, maybe that's what we should call this episode. We're off to drown worms.
There we go.
Well, Liz, thank you again for being on the program. So glad I met you, and so glad for what you guys are doing there. Yes. So we'll be sure to get this out into our community and to our first responders who watch and who listen. And I'm really grateful for you and for what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. I'm blessed every time I get to talk to people at certain events, and it's what keeps me going. Actually, that I know there are days when, as in any organization, where you're just like, oh, can I do this much longer? And then for whatever reason, somebody is always put in my path that changes me back to, okay, let's keep going. So. And thank you for what you're doing, because people need to hear a lot about what's going on and what their options are.
Wow, if you're like me, that is a powerful story that makes you angry. But I'm so glad that Liz and Joe have turned their pain into purpose in creating Responders Retreat. So maybe you're a first responder and you've been quietly struggling. Well, you have a place where you can go and you can rest, you can connect, and you can begin your healing. So be sure to visit their website to find out more information about the next retreat. Visit firstrespondersretreat.org. I've put a link in the show notes, so go check it out. And finally, thank you for listening. Thank you for serving and for doing the hard work that is wellness. Hey, we'll be back next week with more first responder wellness conversations. So be sure to follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check it out so you won't miss an episode. And remember, you are not alone. And if you need someone to talk to and don't know where you can turn, you can dial 988 for help. Until next time, be well, take care of yourself and those around you, and go out and do something great in the world.